Australia, a constitutionally racist nation. Confronting as this definition is, the following presentation will explore our responsibility to the First Nations people and the problem with the current Constitution. The problem with the Constitution is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people or First Nations people are not mentioned, except where racial discrimination is permitted under Section 51. Firstly, looking across to New Zealand, the Maori people are recognised, acknowledged and coexist with the government through a treaty. Although there are conversations about changing the Australian Constitution, a treaty remains to be seen. Does changing the Constitution give us the same recognition and acknowledgement as a treaty would? Secondly, a survey conducted by Indigenous X found that majority of those surveyed voted no to changing the Constitution, revealing attitudes of suspicion, fear, and resentment. Therefore, what is changing the Constitution going to change? Thirdly, the lack of collaboration with First Nations people, the lack of ongoing evaluation of programs, misplacement of funds, and unrealistic timeframes, closing the gap target set in 2008 remains to be met. Mind the gap. Since the government has failed to deliver on many promises, goals, and targets, does changing the Constitution mean that we just surrender and consent to be governed? A bigger problem than the Constitution is the acceptance of racial attitudes towards us First Nations people. An Aboriginal volunteer who teaches Indigenous art and culture in government primary schools experiences racism through ignorance. The rolling of the eyes and uninterested attitudes from teachers makes you feel like you're just another tick off their lists of things that must be done in the classroom. If changing the Constitution gives us more acceptance and recognition in public, then it needs to happen. If white people's attitudes change, then it will be a good thing, but more is needed. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are First Nations people. To set apart our identity, our culture, our ways of being and doing can only happen via a sovereign treaty, something the Constitution can't achieve. The past 200 years of Australian history tells the world that it can't be the problem solver. It's time the government became the listener. It's also time for Australia to return to its Christian beginnings and to reimagine the future, where social justice and love is the heart of all Australians. It is our God-given responsibility to release the chains of bondage from the First Nations people the Australian colonies placed on them at Invasion Day. Make your voice heard.